Did you expect such a reaction from South Africans? I mean, the majority of the country have welcomed your book, but did you expect this?
No, and I'm still overwhelmed. I did expect a reaction from the state. We knew before publication that the law enforcement agencies are going to be terribly unhappy about this book. I expected them to react. I expected them to react sooner. You know, the book has been on the shelves now for 10 days, for more than 10 days, almost 2 weeks. And we're still getting letters from state security threatening us to, or telling us to remove the book from the shelves, failing which they will bring an urgent application. Well, it's a bit late now to bring an urgent application. I would presume the urgency is gone now. They should have acted, you know, the day after the book got out. But I didn't expect the reaction from citizens out there. But I think what this book shows is that South Africa is entering the realm of the gangster state, of becoming a criminal state. Our democracy is very seriously under threat. And I think that is why South Africans are reacting this way, because we can't allow the country to slip further into the realm of the gangster state. And South Africans, I think, are saying up to here and no further.
For sure. You know, Jacques, the thing is, you're a prime example of what happens when you do the right thing in this current society that we live in. I mean, good behavior is not rewarded, as you refer to with the number of good officials at SARS and other government institutions that were let off because of good behavior. I mean, I suppose it's no surprise that we've got rot and corruption continuing to take place, because people simply know that if I do the right thing, I'll get the boot.
Absolutely. In the last 5 years, we've lost a magnificent core of people in our law enforcement agencies, and the list is long, of dedicated, very competent people with a high level of expertise that have been driven out of these organizations. We've lost a very competent head of the Hawks. We've lost a very competent acting SARS commissioner. And the list is long of people we have lost, people that are gone. And they have been replaced by mostly Zuma cronies. And that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing any action about, for example, the Gupta emails. If you just look at the Gupta emails, about there's a substantial body of evidence that shows corruption, money laundering, fraud. Nothing has happened. And that's why nothing has happened. Because Jacob Zuma has destroyed the law enforcement agencies. And this is what the book is about that cabal of people standing behind him that keep him in power and keep him out of prison.
Well, something has happened this week, Jacques. The finance minister announced an inquiry into SARS, which has been welcomed by Jacob Zuma, also welcomed by Tom Moyane. I mean, how do you interpret their welcoming of such an inquiry?
I think we first have to see, number one, who's going to be appointed to lead the commission. If we get a Judge Sereti to investigate SARS, they're going to smell like a bed of flowers afterwards. We will have to see what the terms of reference is, and we will have to see who the judge is. I think Gigaba has done absolutely the right thing. It should have happened 2 or 3 years ago, but at least we are going to have a commission of inquiry. Let's see whether it's going to be a judicial commission of inquiry, who the judge is, and what the terms of reference is. But, you know, something has to be done about SARS. They announced that they're going to have a 50 billion rand shortfall in this tax year. Last year they had a 30 billion rand tax fall. And we need an efficient SARS to enable the state to pay social grants and to armor the police and to build schools and hospitals. And that's why I think it's starting to hurt the state. It's starting to hurt government that the law enforcement agencies have disintegrated to this level. We also need a commission of inquiry into the NPA. We need a commission of inquiry into the Hawks, into crime intelligence. The rot is deep and it's everywhere.
I mean, if they had to approach you to be on that inquiry, you've clearly got a lot of information here about exactly what is going on at SARS. I mean, beyond the fact that our economy is not in the best shape, your book makes allegations about the fact that SARS is simply not treating all taxpayers the same. You make allegations about the president's tax affairs, several ANC government officials' tax affairs, several criminals, particularly in the cigarette companies' tax affairs. So if you were approached to be on that inquiry, would you stick your hand up?
I've said from the beginning, if anybody from the law enforcement agencies who is serious about investigating the fraud and corruption that I mentioned, come to me. I will gladly help them where I can. But they're trying to shoot the messenger. I mean, I'm becoming the problem. They're not the problem, I'm the problem. They want to criminally charge me, which has happened over and over and over in our recent past, where you had brilliant officials that were criminally charged. I mean, not any of the charges, not any of the prosecutions were successful, but nevertheless they've been charged, they've been suspended, they've been driven out.
And are you afraid for your life, Jacques?
You know, I've received death threats before when I was a journalist, and I've always said if somebody tells you that he's going to kill you, he doesn't really mean it, because he's not going to warn you beforehand. It is of course it's unnerving to get a threatening phone call, but I'm not particularly concerned. I mean, I'm not going to change my lifestyle or anything.
And you know, in your book, you paint, and please correct me if I didn't get the right interpretation, you paint the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, as a possible knight in shining armor to start a new system, a cleaner system. I'd be interested in your views of his selection of running mates this week that were announced.
I don't think I paint Cyril Ramaphosa in such a favourable light.
Right.
I mean, I more paint Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma in a negative light,
yes,
because I think it's a frightening thought that she can come to power, and you just have to look at who she surrounds herself with. You know, I'm not a political analyst, but I was surprised at Ramaphosa's list. It's early. I think there were people that hoped that somebody like Lindiwe Sisulu would have been on his list. She's obviously running her own campaign. I think, like anybody else, I have no idea what's going to happen in December. You know, it depends on who you read, who says what. So it's just a matter of waiting and see.
And Jacques, you know, you also speak about a lot of other agents that have enabled this maladministration at key institutions, this wasteful expenditure to continue for such a long time. And you have spoken about the media. I think many people have heard the interviews that you have given. I mean, for a reader who's saying, okay, but you're a journalist yourself, I mean, how do we know that you applied the correct checks and balances and did the correct procedures to get this information out, and that you are not, like Paul O'Sullivan was said earlier on this week when he was on the show, a checkbook journalist?
Yeah, and by the way, Paul O'Sullivan also said that he assisted me in writing the book, which is absolutely not true. I think throughout the writing of the book, I made one telephone call to Paul O'Sullivan. I've looked at his documentation that he's put out in the media and on the internet and whatever, but he didn't assist me at all. You know, if my information is wrong, why does the State Security Agency want to charge me? Because if the information is wrong, then I haven't broken the law. I've just written a lot of rubbish. Why does SARS want to charge me with revealing confidential taxpayers' information if that information is not correct? And I can assure you that I have piles of evidence and documentation. And if it becomes necessary, I will show this.
the role of the private sector as well. I mean, many people say on the one hand of corruption is the public sector, on the other hand, the private sector. I was quite taken aback when you spoke about, I mean, the level of overdrafts that the president had. I mean, he had bad credit records, yet banks were still willing to open accounts for him without doing, I mean, am I correct in interpreting you as maybe suggesting that financial institutions like banks were also complicit in allowing such behavior to go on?
Absolutely. If Jacob Zuma was just a man on the street, he would have been an insolvent a long time ago. But you know, if you look, and you're now talking about his financial record before he became president, even, is that there are so many instances where banks bent backwards to accommodate him, knowing that he had a bad debt record, that he wasn't repaying his overdrafts, and they still gave him another overdraft, and they increased the overdraft, and they simply didn't take any steps against Zuma. So of course they are complicit in the fact that he became president. There is no way that they can sit back and just say that, sorry, I mean, we had no part in this. We've seen it with the emergence of the Gupta emails as well, that the private sector played a devastating role in looting our state-owned enterprises. So yeah, you know, I think lots of people are complicit here. There are very few people here that can wash their hands and say, I had nothing to do with this.
And you know, Jacques, KPMG as well, if we just stick to the theme with the private sector just for one more moment. So they came out and they admitted wrongdoing with their handling of the Gupta accounts. But it's not only the Gupta accounts from your book that they did wrongdoing with. No.
I mean, KPMG was complicit in establishing the so-called SARS rogue unit, saga, in the sense that they brought out a report that Tom Moyane used to get rid of the top executives in SARS. They were complicit in the sense that they brought out a report, a shameful report. So yeah, of course KPMG is also complicit. And I mean, it's very ironic. Yesterday, you know, I own a restaurant now in Rubia Castile in the Western Cape.
And I imagine your wife is not too happy at the fact that you have not been in the kitchen.
But ironically, I had 26 people from KPMG over for lunch yesterday, for a corporate lunch. But anyway, you know, so there you go.
Ironic indeed. I imagine that Fiona must have been very busy in that kitchen.
I wish I was there to listen to what they were discussing, but anyway.
But anyway, definitely. But then, I mean, then the issue of the drug smugglers, right?
Tobacco smugglers.
The tobacco smugglers, right? Also, guys with a number of accounts, because they don't leave that money underneath their bed.
No, you know, tobacco smuggling has replaced drug smuggling as the most profitable, or one of the most profitable criminal enterprises, because you pay, I don't know what, 35 Rand for a packet of cigarettes. It only costs about 3 or 4 Rand to manufacture. There's a lot of excise duty on a packet of cigarettes. So if you can avoid the excise duty, you make an incredible profit. One of our neighbors is Zimbabwe, which is a major world producer of tobacco. So tobacco is simply smuggled into South Africa. Cigarettes are manufactured and they are distributed without paying the excise duty. But these tobacco smugglers, they're very colorful people and very flamboyant people in most cases.
As I read with the character of Adrian in your book.
Absolutely. And many of them have been looking for connections in high places. You know, people that can help them with their tax problems and maybe their criminal problems and that kind of thing. So they've been befriending people like Edward Zuma, Zuma's eldest son. They've paid him tens of thousands, and I've got all the documentation, tens of thousands of Rand every month just to keep him happy and for the political connections. There's Mr. Yusuf Kachi that paid visits who claims to have paid visits to Nkandla. There's Adrian Mazzotti, who has established a relationship with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And these people somebody like Dlamini Zuma must be very careful who she deals with. Maybe she didn't know that Mozotti was a self-confessed smuggler, fraudster, briber, name it, money launderer. But they must be very careful to deal with these people. And, you know, somebody like Mozotti, for example, has just bought himself a mine in the Limpopo province. And he says on his website he's a big proponent of radical economic transformation. So much for a man who's hiding his money and got a 600 million rand tax bill from SARS. And is hiding his money instead of paying it to the fiscus. But anyway, so he's purchased himself a mine. He says he's a great fan of Minister Zwane's mining charter. He's linked up with Dlamini Zuma, so he's preparing himself to be a future Gupta. And
yet I think you said that it's only 1 or 2 black people on his board.
Yeah, no, nothing that he tries to portray a kind of an image.
You know, Jacques, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap it there. We are out of time.